when I was in my first CEO role, I was responsible for implementing a massive IT transformation. When I came into the role, what I really learned, and I learned it very hard, was that the transformation was really about our people and not about IT.
Yeah.
I was focusing so much on making sure that the processes in the IT worked, and I completely left the people element out of it.
Today, on Make Minutes Matter, I'm joined by Sarah Murrow, President and CEO of Allianz Trade Americas. Sarah's career spans more than 2 decades with the same organization, yet her journey has taken her across continents, through leadership inflection points, and ultimately back to where it all began. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Karen.
Let's talk a little bit about this interesting career.
Okay.
And the more I've learned about you, the more I realize that we have so much in common. But you first, tell us a little bit about how someone in today's day and age is able to spend a significant amount of time with one organization. Not a small feat.
No, and it's actually very unusual. If I look across my peers and my friend groups, most of them had at least 2 or 3 employers since graduating from college. But in fact, I've been with Allianz Trade for 22 years. Despite only having one employer during my career, I actually have felt like I've had a number of different jobs because I've worked with the business in the US first for 12 years, coming right out of school and joining the business then, moving first to Paris to hold a global role, and then to London to hold a regional role, and then my first role as the CEO in the UK and Ireland, before returning to the Americas in July of this year to take on the Americas head of region role, the president and CEO role of the business where I started. So there's a huge amount of gratification and achievement in that alone. But the career that I've had feels very diverse. It doesn't feel like I've only been with one employer.
I couldn't agree with you more. As I was listening and reading about you, talking with you, when I started my career right out of school, I went to go work for Citibank. And I honestly thought I was going to spend the rest of my life there. I spent almost 20 years with Citi. And like you, it was one organization, but they moved me to so many different positions in so many different parts of the business that it felt like with every move, I was working for an entirely different company. And I think that's something that people need to really think about today. Instead of leaping off to go to another organization to get these experiences, sometimes they're sitting right in front of your nose. Would you agree?
If you want a varied career, you can do that by moving to different companies, but you can also do it by choosing a company that has, for example, multinational operations, if you want a flavor of being an expat and living abroad, or works across a number of lines of business so that you can diversify your experience. So I think it's really about being selective when you're choosing the business that you want to work for. To be very candid, that was not necessarily what I had in mind when I joined Allianz Trade. It took 22 years of reflection to be able to realize that, but maybe it's information that will help, recent graduates coming out of school now. But it's something really important. And I have had a number of opportunities to explore outside of Allianz Trade over my 22 years. And I kept thinking, why? There's really no need. I've had a wonderful opportunity to live and work in 3 different countries, to work at the local, regional, and global level, to educate myself on new types of products. And the equity that I've built over that time is so significant. So, I mean, if someone were to say, Sarah, should I stay and grow or leap, to another business? I would say, really consider the equity that you've built, because that goes to waste, right?
That so resonates with me, because when I did leave Citi, it was the only place that I had ever worked at that point. And what a great organization to be part of. Just so super on so many parts. Of course, it has a few faults here and there, but for the most part, just an absolutely fabulous place to work and learn as a new professional. And when I left with the idea that everything looked like Citi. And then I got out into the real world, and I realized that it doesn't look like that. And the thing that I had minimized and undervalued more than anything was my network.
Yeah.
Over all that time, I had built, like you, I'm sure, a whole infrastructure, a system of being able to get stuff done. In fact, that was my brand name. Like, she's the one that gets it done.
It's your superpower, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when I left and went to this other firm, it wasn't that I couldn't execute. It was just so hard. I felt like I was running in quicksand for such a long time. And it was, I just remember how out of place I felt. And as I counsel people now, people who are in that position where it's like, should I stay or should I go? That is one of the first things I talk about is do not underestimate what you've built, because it is so hard to recreate that again and so overlooked, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think that goes along with this that's kind of funny is after I did leave Citi and I was out I was actually working in the .com space at this point. And so very volatile.
Yes.
Very volatile. And so I think maybe the average span at this point was 18 months here, 2 years there. This is a period for about 8 years or so. So I had a number of different roles with different organizations because many of them didn't succeed. They just they were a flash of light and then disappeared. And I remember having a conversation with someone at a very large regional bank about a position that they were interested in my filling. And there were 2 people on the evaluation committee that were so worried about my instability.
Because you had so many roles over the past...
No, not the fact that I'd had so many roles over my period with Citi, but the fact that once I'd left Citi, that I'd had this opportunity, this opportunity, this opportunity. And there was actually a discussion about my ability to hold on to a job. I ultimately passed on that position. And let's fast forward another 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And I was at HSBC. And we were doing a rebuild of our team. And I remember having a conversation with people about this particular individual that I had sourced from Citi, who had only been at Citi, had all this great stability.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what the people said? Oh, she has no ability to change.
Yes. The reverse is also true.
Yes, exactly.
You can be considered unstable or a one-trick pony, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
It was the craziest thing. And I remember after that whole conversation was over, having another discussion with my boss. And she said, Karen, things have changed. She goes, what was not really a great track record now looks completely different than it did before. And what people are looking for is this ability to adapt,
mm-hmm.
to be resilient, to be able to take on new challenges in different organizations. And I said, it's a shame because when we had both been at Citibank, I said, when we were at Citi, we had so many different positions, but yet people looked at it as just one big monolith. Oh, you were at Citi. I wish I had known that because I would have changed my resume to look very different based upon this idea of resilience. But that wasn't what people were buying back then. They were buying stability, normalcy, calming of the waters. They weren't looking for people who were disruptors at that point.
I will say that I do have the benefit of going through a rebrand at Allianz. So my resume actually does show Euler Hermes and then Allianz Trade because we rebranded in the early 2022. So
well, you were very lucky about that. Very lucky.
I joke, but it's true. It's like, but I don't feel ashamed of being with one employer because I really feel like I've gotten so much out of my experience.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more.
I would really challenge people to say, this person can't show adaptability or resilience because they've only been with one employer. But I guess it changes as you go.
Yes, and it's based on the role.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the things that I speak about with new people going into the workplace right now. Is to really look at the different positions, understand what skills you're building as you go from place to place to place, and make sure you're highlighting that. And again, for folks that are just coming into the workplace or who are recent arrivals, they're operating in a world that they don't really understand. They don't talk about this in school.
No.
You know? So when you're counseling people in your organization, what do you say to them, to the new arrivals? What's advice that you give them?
What I would say is if you are new to the business, one of the ways that I found that I was successful was to say yes. Say yes to opportunities. Say yes to putting yourself in a position where it might be uncomfortable, but that means you're in a growth mode, right? You're in growth mode. Say yes to project work. Say yes to being able to interact and establish credibility and build relationships with people outside your day-to-day. So saying yes is really important, and being open to those opportunities.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree with that open-mindedness. Again, just thinking about a few years back when I was working with a variety of people who had just arrived out of school. For whatever reason, and I don't think that this is uncommon, they arrived with this idea of this very defined career path that they were going to accomplish. I'm going to be here at this point and here at that point. And I found myself breaking their bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way.
It's not linear.
It doesn't work that way.
Mm-mm.
And I also found myself having more than one conversation with many of them about this idea of checking the ego. Okay, you've graduated. Good for you. You've joined a great firm. Good for you. Now come in with the rest of us and roll up your sleeves and start to learn, because that's what it's all about. Every day there's something new. And no one has that advantage in this environment as far as I'm concerned. The world is just changing too fast. You can't say that, oh, I don't need to learn that because I've already done something similar to that in the past. What's your thought on that?
No, I completely agree. I mean, along with saying yes, and that really means being open to learning, right? Being curious.
Yes.
I think that is a critical success factor for anyone joining a new organization, right? To establish your network, to establish credibility, to show that you are adaptable, that you can learn. I think that there's also a lot to be said for taking risks. And I know that just sounds very cliche, right? Oh, you have to take risks to get ahead. But really what taking risks means is actually having the confidence that if it doesn't work out, you can fall back on yourself, right?
Yes.
Like you are self-confident enough to know that if you take a risk and it doesn't work out, you can adapt. And having that self-confidence is something that I think I lacked. When I look at my early part of my career, I really lacked that. You know what I mean? That confidence that I could make it work out. But that comes with maturity and with experience, I think.
It does. And the more experience you have, the better you get at it. But let's just say this, that I do not know anyone, either in my current life or in history, that got it right the first time. Nobody does that. Nobody. And even if you got it over the line, you didn't do it perfectly. Perfection, optimization, that is something that comes from treading that wheel over and over again and finding the nuance that's going to get you to that perfect spot. But it doesn't happen magically. And it takes a lot of effort and grit and maybe even a couple tears and disappointments and frustration and all the other stuff that goes along with that. But when you finally get there, that triumph is so cool.
It is sweet.
Is the coolest,
it is
coolest
sweet.
thing. And I think that for many of our younger people, we're directing this, I guess, to this group, because I think they need a lot of insight and mentoring. That what you may think is this throwaway work is some of the most foundational stuff that you're going to do in your entire career. All of these silly things, these silly projects that aren't worth my time, they're absolutely worth your time, because it gives you a training ground to figure out what's going to work in the business, work for you personally, work for you aspirationally, you know?
I agree. And I would also say that engaging in other types of work or relationships in work where you're not always working with the same people, it gives you a lot of opportunity to learn not only what works, but also what doesn't work.
Exactly.
So some of the key learnings that I've had were actually from maybe people that I had interacted with in the office that I really disliked the interaction. And I thought, when I get to their level, I will not act like that.
I will never do that again.
I will never do that.
Oh, how many times?
I know. And it's, I'm not saying that I have had tons of those experiences, but they're very clarifying moments, and they're character building, and they really hone who you are as a leader and who you aspire to be. And I still remember those lessons learned from early days,
Yes.
and you emulate the leaders that you respect, and you mimic those strong leaders that you've had, and then you know how to adapt away from other types of leadership styles that you felt haven't really worked or, haven't motivated you.
It's the other piece that goes along with that is perspective. So I can remember, much like you, I've been so blessed with having so many great bosses, leaders. And my career is just full of them, and I'm blessed because of that, as are you.
Yes.
And I remember some of the folks that maybe didn't strike a real strong chord with me, and just watching them and thinking to myself, oh, what is wrong with these people? And then one day I found myself in that same spot. And then I understood.
Mm-hmm.
Then I understood. It looks easy from the outside, but it's really hard once you're in the role. It's hard to make decisions, especially when you're making decisions that impact so many people,
Yeah, you gain understanding, as you said, perspective and empathy as you grow through an organization. I think even when you have an interaction with maybe a leader or somebody in the organization that you dislike the interaction, or it hasn't made you feel positive about it, I think what's important is taking from that lessons learned about what you don't want to emulate as a leader, but also there will be positives that come from that interaction as well. So I just think caring and looking at every interaction as an opportunity is really important early on in your career to establish that strong foundation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. In my personal belief is that everything happens with purpose.
It does.
And so that means that if you're willing to actually invest in taking a look at where those little nuggets are, that's something that you can put in your bag and take it with you wherever you're going, whether it's in your current role or something that's going to come about in the future. The other piece that I find somewhat humorous is that in order to appreciate someone who's really great as a leader, you have to have experienced someone who's not.
Yes, because you don't know the difference otherwise.
You don't know the difference.
Yes.
And that was part of my problem at Citi in those early days, is I just worked for one after the other of all these fabulous people that, again, as I said, I just thought the world was full of these folks. And then I got out and realized, holy cow.
I was so lucky when I was there. Yes.
Yes. That is so crazy. So we also share some similarity in that we have really broken a little bit of glass in a world that's dominated by men. And not that I'm going to be a big proponent of, the differences between men and women in the workplace. Let's just recognize that there was some thinking back then that is different than it is now. What was that like for you?
Again, I don't know if I was just really fortunate, and I'm not sugarcoating this, but I've really felt that Allianz Trade and my opportunities, they were given to me based on merit.
Got it.
And I can say this, hand on my heart, like this is really how I feel, which is also, I think, not just based on gender, but other factors as well. Probably something that if you are looking for a great employer, like something to really, explore when you're talking to the business, do you promote internally? Are those promotions based off of merit, or is it tenure? Do you know what I mean? To really kind of investigate that. It is true, though, simply by looking at the numbers, of course, in insurance, definitely. There is insurance in general, there's about a 50%, it's average representation for men and women. But when you get into the C-suite, the numbers drop off quite significantly. which is, I think, something that's changing. I span insurance and trade finance. And I would say in the trade finance space, it's actually, I think, a bit more promising in terms of equal balance.
Yeah, and because the focus has been there.
Yes.
And none of these equalization or fairness initiatives work without focus and without commitment to make that happen. And I think in the financial services space, which spans everything that both of us have been involved in, early on in early days, there was a commitment, I think, to try to find the best person as opposed to a person that fit a particular profile.
Yeah.
And I think we've benefited from that. But for people who are again starting out in their careers and thinking, how I leverage an opportunity, whether they're a male or a female, I think we can agree that bringing your best self, applying the skills and the talents that you were given and developed over the course of your life, that finding those opportunities to put those on display and utilize them, that is a better way of managing your career than trying to find the opportunity because you happen to look a certain way over another.
I agree with that. And I would also add that one of the, if I look at the teams that I've worked with during my time at Allianz Trade, the individuals that really stand out in terms of performance have one very important thing in common, which is that they care. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like such a simple thing, but really, if you care, it brings your best self to the job. You might take on additional responsibilities to get something done. You're a team player, right? You really put the thought and the effort into different tasks. And I would say that if you're finding yourself as a new joiner not caring, you might not be in the right organization.
I agree.
Because that is really a prerequisite to success, is you have to care about what you're doing and the mission that you have in front of you.
Yeah, you have to feel that you're spending your time in the right spot.
Yes.
You have to believe that you're making a difference. And I do empathize with some of the younger people. I mean, I think it's definitely in the top 5 for this next generation coming through, feeling the opportunity to make a difference. That's a huge driver, bigger than money, bigger than titles, bigger than anything. This whole idea of being able to be part of a greater world. That's not a joke. That's something that's a real feeling. And even though that may not have been put on billboards or on slogans and things like that when we were going through our early career, that's kind of the path that we were forging. We wanted to make a difference. We had opportunities to do that.
We wanted purpose.
Yes.
Right? We wanted the work that we were doing to matter. Mm-hmm. And I think it is important for employers to make sure that purpose is front and center when recruiting, especially in the younger generations. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. And I think the recruiting process today, and I don't know how it is at Allianz, but I've had multiple experiences with many, many, many different organizations. I think this recruiting process is missing a beat somewhat especially for the younger generations. There's not a full explanation of what it looks like, why they're doing it, how it plugs in. I think it starts in the recruiting process, and then as they come into the workplace, because things are changing so quickly, and the amount of, I'm going to use a word that sounds not great, but the chaos of the workplace in today's environment with the amount of change underway, I'm just not sure that the workplace is giving these new people what they need in order to figure out how to plug in.
Yeah, the why.
The why.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's missing. It's missing in a huge way. So what do you do with your teams where you've got this disruption that's underway, whether it's hybrid working, the introduction of AI, all the new technologies that are making things streamlined and optimized, different customer expectations. I mean, on every single front, there's not one of them that's not being disrupted right now. And then you have these new people coming into an environment which has always had a little bit of noise, but never the amount of noise that we're facing right now. So how do you help someone who has very little perspective come into an organization that's being upheaved and help them find that normalcy? How do you do that?
It's true. And we talk a lot around the topic change fatigue.
Yes.
There's so much change happening and, we need to slow down, we need to stabilize, which is all true. And I fully appreciate that. And there's a lot of comfort in stability and, consistency. And we do need to strike the balance between that and change. But the reality is we are changing because the world is changing.
Yes.
We are not changing just because we want to change, right? We are adapting because the pace of change in the world is becoming faster and more every day. And I would disagree with you in that actually I find that the new joiners are actually more adaptable and willing to change than maybe the people that have been there for decades.
Well, on that front, I will agree.
Okay.
on that front, I will agree that the new group is coming in with this
more open to
they're operating in an environment where their whole lives things have been changing and disrupted.
Yes.
So they've got that they're predisposed to that. And I've fair enough, for large swaths of the workplace who haven't been exposed to that rapid innovation, this is a little bit more challenging for them. But nonetheless, when everything is still upside down, how do you help these folks find that tether? What am I going to hang on to that I could call as true that's going to give me the foundation to start building?
Yeah. And maybe what I can do, Karen, is I can talk about probably one of the biggest lessons learned over my career.
Please.
Where I failed miserably. And this is always, it's a bit uncomfortable to talk about it, but if I don't talk about it, no one else is going to talk about their failures either. When I was in my first CEO role, I was responsible for implementing a massive IT transformation within the business. And the system that we'd been using within the business for 3 decades. It was time, right? It was time to upgrade.
Yes.
When I came into the role, the transformation had already started. So I made a lot of assumptions around things that had already been put in place that maybe weren't. So that was the first mistake.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But I think that was the very first mistake that I made. But what I really learned, and I learned it very hard, was that the transformation was really about our people and not about IT.
Yeah.
I was focusing so much on, testing and defect registration and, non-regression testing and making sure that the processes in the IT worked. And I completely left the people element out of it, like the change management element out of it. And I had a really unhappy team for a period of time. And it was something that I really, a lesson that I learned a very hard way. So when you ask me around how do you keep those people tethered to, to the ongoing change, it's really around making sure that you're thinking about people first and foremost and the change management that they're going through and understanding that different people have different speeds in terms of, following through the change curve and really putting yourself in the shoes of the person who maybe has built their career on knowing how the old system worked and is now completely unstable in feeling very insecure about their performance at work because they don't know how this new system works. I really failed to really appreciate that strong people element. So now when we're going through large transformations, luckily I haven't had another IT transformation. I'm still, healing from that a little bit. I don't know if you did one, but they're really difficult. And I have a lot of empathy for leaders that are putting that through. But it's really focusing a lot on the people, doing pulse surveys and check-ins and being very clear on the why. And, people are really resilient and I am always impressed by the quality and the talent of the teams at Allianz Trade. They can endure difficulty, but they need to know why, right?
Yes,
they need to understand what the benefit is to our customers, to our broker partners, to the employees when it's all working well. So it's really important to continue that message, and also to do a lot of check-ins with the team and trainings, especially when you're working with new systems, giving people the confidence that they're able to do their jobs well.
Yeah, and the ability to fail, and the
Yes.
ability to make mistakes,
And ask questions.
and to have that open space where it's okay. And I mean, very few people that I've ever met in my whole life have gone into a situation to purposely make a mistake. Mistakes, especially when you're going through transformations like the magnitude of what you're talking about, I've been through them as well, and I agree with you. You cannot over communicate enough. Yes. But I also find that this spirit that has to come with that involves the fact that we're all going to learn this together. That when you're putting something new in place, de facto, there aren't really any experts that exist that are going to understand the full 360 of what's going to happen. But that can be very exciting as well for people. And I think being able to share that excitement with folks and helping them plug back in to that why, it's almost as if it's the ticket to admission for success. But I'm impressed, Sarah, because not a lot of people have the courage to be able to talk about making mistakes. Yeah. And I think in today's world, that's one of the differentiators for great leadership, is to be able to say that I made a mistake, or maybe I don't have all the answers. I mean, again, going back to when I started my career, those words didn't come out of people's mouths very often. And I think it took us longer to get to where we needed to go sometimes because of that fear. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think being open around lessons learned and how taking risks resulted in learnings and growth, that is really what motivates people. We were talking before the podcast started around storytelling and how important those stories are. Yes. Those are the stories that resonate with the teams that are looking up to you as a leader. So I do think it's important to share lessons learned, to explain, where you've done things well, or maybe could have done things better, or underestimated a challenge. So I completely agree with you. I think you have to be a confident leader, though, to get up in front of people or to come on a podcast and say, yes, I made a mistake. Yeah. I didn't do this as well as I should, but I learned my lesson. And you know what? It is the front and center thing that I think about now whenever we're going through a transformation topic.
Yeah. And think about that. I mean, by going through that, by acknowledging it, by leaning into it, by being honest with yourself and with people around you, you now have that pillar that's part of who you are that's going to prevent that from happening in the future. But even bigger, by talking about it honestly and openly, you're helping other people understand that it's nothing to be afraid of, that you can admit when you screw up. I mean, you don't want to do it all the time, of course.
No, there's a limit. You've got a limited number, right?
Right.
Like your ums and ahs, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to have an allowance for screw-ups. But again, I just think that the more that we, in a leadership role, we can share these learnings with people, and just to help them understand that the path is not, as you said earlier, it's not linear. You don't start here and then precisely move this way, all the way along. It just doesn't work.
No, and there's also a lot to be said for whenever you start a role. I mean, it's the concept you are not prepared for that role, and you're not fulfilling the role completely when you get the role because you're new in the role.
Exactly.
So this is to be expected, and I think people also need to understand that, when you do take on a new role, there is a bit of slack. There is, time for you to learn and to upskill. And I do think that what is really important is if someone takes a new role, and this is something that I've really tried to do. Whenever you take a new role, you have about 6 months to ask all the stupid questions, right?
Yes.
And you can ask them a couple of times, right? But after 6 months, kind of your opportunity to ask those questions, they're less tolerated, I would say.
Agreed.
So when you get into a new role, don't lean on the strengths that you have. And, it's really important to dive right into the areas that you don't know, because people are there to help support you to answer those questions. And those first 6 months are critical in terms of learning.
Yes. And as you said, there's an openness, a kind of a shininess, a promise, optimism that goes along with a new person, a willingness to help. which goes away after a period of time, usually 6 months, where if the willingness to help is rejected, or like, I've got this, people back off.
They back off.
They back
yeah.
off. It's like, I've got other things to do with my time. If you don't want to take advantage of this, okay, sink or swim. And then that person's put in a place where they kind of have to
navigate.
Redo, which in and of itself, I guess, is a little bit of a learning. Wow, that was really great. Tune in to part 2 of this conversation with Sarah Murrow. See you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Make Minutes Matter. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, or click the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And let me know what you thought of today's conversation by following us on Instagram at Karen Gilhooly 1. That's Karen, Karen, Gilhooly, Gilhooly, and the number 1. Let's make every moment in your career truly matter. Have a great day.